Hello, everybody. In Chapter 5, we're going to be talking how to form a business. Now, this might be the reason why you took the class because maybe you wanted to start your own business one day. Kind of going back to the Chapter 1 where we're talking about becoming an entrepreneur. So, in this chapter, we're going to be talking about basic forms of business ownership, which include sole proprietorships, partnerships, corporations, corporate expansion, franchises, and cooperatives. So a sole proprietorship, the name is pretty much in the title. It's a business owned and usually managed by just one person. Partnership is a legal form of business with two or more owners, and then a corporation is a legal entity with authority to act and have a liability separate from its owners. When you think about a corporation, I'll use Amazon as an example. Even though it was started out by just one person, Jeff Bezos, it's blown up into be such a big thing to where now it is its own thing. And in the eyes of the U.S. Government, a corporation pretty much is a person. So even though Jeff Bezos is the one who started it, he's the one running it. Amazon is kind of its own deal. So forms of business ownership. So the percentage of businesses in the United States here are 72% of them are sole proprietorships, 20% are corporations, and 8% are partnerships. But then the percentage of total receipts. So 81% come from corporations, 13% from partnerships, and 6% comes from sole proprietorships. So obviously you can see here corporations are making most of the money from the businesses. So some of the advantages of sole proprietorships, you've got ease of starting and ending the business, being your own boss, pride of ownership, leaving a legacy, retention of company profits, and then no special taxes. You are your own boss. You can work as much as you want. You can kind of earn as much as you want. And yeah, that's kind of what everybody has in mind whenever they want to start their own business, is just being their own boss and kind of doing their own thing. Some of the disadvantages associated with that is you have unlimited liability. That just means the responsibility of the business owners for all the debts in the business. It completely falls on you, so limited financial resources. Depending on how much you're able to save before you start your own business. I mean, are you able to go out and get a loan, through a bank? Are you able to get investments, opportunities from somebody else? You've got management difficulties. A lot of people who haven't managed other people before or haven't managed their own business before, that's where they come into a lot of issues. Overwhelming time commitment. You're going to be working pretty much 24/7 on your business, just because, I mean, this is your livelihood. You want it to succeed. You've got few fringe benefits. Along with becoming your own boss, you might think, oh, I can cut out every day, go play golf at 3 o'clock, or whatever it might be. Whereas, that's probably not the case if you're, a sole proprietor. Through my job, I've got quite a few fringe benefits. I get invited to go play golf outings. I get invited to go and do things, through my business. From time to time, I'll get tickets to go, like the Sliders games here in Springfield, different things like that. We're sole proprietors, a lot of times they don't have that just because they don't have those like corporate relationships that are happening kind of behind the scenes. You've got limited growth, just because, I mean, like I said, it's completely up to you on how much you want to grow. And then you've got limited time or lifespan of your company. So the number off the top of my head, I think it's about 80% of sole proprietorships. They fail within the first year, and then by the first, I think, the first 3 years of a sole proprietorship, it's about 95% of these organizations are closing, just because it's really hard to run your own business. So a really good example here is being the sole proprietor of a company like a clothing boutique. Means making a major time commitment to run the business, including constantly seeking out new customers and looking for reliable employees. If you were sole proprietor, what would you need to do if you wanted to take a week's vacation? So this actually kind of lines up perfectly because my wife, she runs an online clothing boutique. So she teaches full time at a high school as a Spanish teacher, but then in spare time she runs this online boutique with her sister-in-law and then also her mom. So, if we do go on vacation someplace, I mean, she's constantly working, on the online boutique, making sure, orders are getting filled, all the products are up there, nothing's happening with the website that shouldn't be happening. And especially if we could go on like a big family vacation with my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law. I mean, if all three of them are there, they need to figure out, who's going to be fulfilling the orders. If they're gone, do they have a backup plan to get those orders out? So I mean, there's a lot of moving parts into it, and that's just one of those things that you kind of got to think through as you're going through it, because I mean, if you are running that business, there are other people who are, reliant on you. So, as far as types of partnerships, we have a general partnership, um, partnership that just all owners share in operating the business and assuming liability for the business debts. So you pretty much equal agreement all the way across. Where then you also have the limited partnership, so a partnership with one or more general partners and one or more limited partners. So you might have somebody, two people that are sharing kind of everything, and then you got like a third or fourth person that just kind of have a limited, part in the business. So limited partnerships. Sometimes you see that with sport teams, whether it be the basketball team, baseball team. You might have two people who are kind of the people in front doing kind of everything, and then you've got limited partners behind them who are just contributing a few $1 million into buying buying the sports team. They don't have a whole lot of say, but they are still part of the team. You've got general partners, an owner or a partner who has unlimited liability and is active in managing the firm. Limited partner, an owner who invests money in the business but does not have any management responsibility or liability for the losses beyond the investment. So, kind of go back to my example of a sports team. If you got somebody who just invests $1 million into it, they're pretty much kind of doing it just to be part of the ownership group, looking to hopefully get a little bit of their funds back. And a lot of the people that just do throw in a couple $1 million, they kind of do it just to say, hey, I own the San Francisco Giants, or I own whoever it might be. For limited liability, for a limited partner, the responsibility of a business's owners for losses only up to the amount that they invest. Limited partners and shareholders have limited liability. So some other forms of partnerships here. Master limited partnership, that's just a partnership that looks much like a corporation, and that acts like a corporation. Is it traded on a stock exchange, but is taxed like a partnership and thus avoids a corporate income tax. limited, limited liability partnership, a partnership that limits partners' risk of losing their personal assets to only their acts and omissions, and the acts and omissions of people under their supervision. A couple of things like this. I mean, you're going to talk more about it, like if you take an accounting class, as to what's the pros and cons of both. As far as this class goes, we're not going to dive a whole lot deeper into those subjects. Some of the advantages of partnerships: you have more financial resources. I mean, obviously, two people are better than one when it comes to raising money. You've got shared management and pooled complementary skills and knowledge. You might have one person who's really good at managing other people. The other person might be really good at managing funds. So between the two of them, that's kind of a perfect partnership. You have longer survival rates, and then there's no special taxes associated with that. Some of the disadvantages: once again, you have limited liability along with your partner. If it's a 50-50 partnership, I mean, you're still on the hook for 50% of the business there. So division of profits. So like I said, if it's 50-50, however much is coming in, you're only getting half of it. And then disagreements among partners. That's the biggest thing that you see in partnerships is, somebody might want the business to go one way and the other person wants the business to go the other way. And then it ends up being, a really bad situation. One of the things that I like to use an example is the movie The Founder, which is about Ray Kroc and McDonald's. So I think it's out on Netflix. It's a really good movie to watch, just because kind of started out like McDonald's anyway, started out with the McDonald's brothers. Ray Kroc, he was a salesman, got to know them a little bit. He ended up investing into it. They ended up becoming partners. Um, there was a contract that was written up. Ray Kroc didn't necessarily abide by the contract, and then he ended up becoming much bigger than the McDonald's brothers and swindled them out of the organization. So, that was a classic example of disagreement among partners and how in the end, Ray Kroc ended up being the sole owner of McDonald's and everything that they were running when it initially started out with two brothers. So another really good movie to watch. So I know like referencing pretty much movies, in every chapter. So I just have a love for movies, and especially when I can relate it to business courses, just because it's something that we can go out, we can watch, and we can relate to. So back to partnerships. Difficulty of termination. Um, whenever you're at the end of a partnership, trying to divide between the two, who is going to take what, going back to the Ray Kroc example, difficulty of termination between the partners. I mean, that was a really difficult thing, but, say the business did fail at that point. I mean, who are the losses going to come on at that point? So, questions to ask when choosing a business partner. So, let me start out by saying that I never suggest going into business with a really good friend or a family member. I've just seen a lot of businesses over the years go downhill really quickly, just because you start out with a family member, you start out with a friend, you think, hey, this is going to go great, and then in the end, you end up hating each other, and it creates conflict, and then you also have the family portion of it or the friend portion of it, um, and it ends up just being really, really messy. Um, and the other thing about it is, I mean, especially when you're in business with family members, a lot of the times people will give another person a pass just because they are a family member and say, oh, that's just, my brother being my brother or my sister being my sister, whatever it might be. But if you were running a successful business and, somebody was, kind of goofing off like your brother is or your sister is, it probably wouldn't fly if it was just somebody that you're working with and not a family member. So with that being said, we'll kind of get back on track here. So some of the things to ask: do you share the same goals? Do you share the same vision for the company? What skills does the person have? Do they complement yours? What can the person bring to the business? What type of decision maker is the person? Do you trust each other? How does the person respond to adversity? And, does he or she try to solve the problem or try to defend his or her ego? And then can the person accept constructive criticism? To what extent can you build the excitement into the partnership? So a lot of great questions to ask. Whenever you're going through this, you probably think, oh yeah, this would fit perfectly with a friend or a family member, but I would highly recommend just not going with a friend or family member if you're trying to start a business, just because it ends up, being a bad situation more than it does a good situation. So we've got a conventional corporation, which is a state chartered legal entity with authority to act and have liability separate from its owners or its stockholders. We've got alien corporations do business in the United States but are chartered in another country. You've got domestic corporations do business in the state in which they are chartered. Foreign corporations do business in one state but they are chartered in another. Closed corporations have stock that is held by a few people that isn't available to the general public. And then open or public corporations sell stock to the general public, which is probably the corporations that we're most used to seeing, like your Walmarts, like your McDonald's, like your Amazon. So quasi-public corporations are chartered by the government as an approved monopoly to perform services to the general public. Professional corporations are owned by those who offer professional services. You've got not-for-profit organizations. They don't seek personal profit from their owners. We talked about that a couple of chapters ago. Multinational corporations operate in several countries. So some of the advantages of corporations is limited liability is not just on one person or two people. It's on the corporation itself. The ability to raise more money for investment. So you can issue more stocks, raise money that way. The overall size of it is going to be very big. Perpetual life. For the most part, corporations don't die overnight. It takes a lot for them to die. I mean, take a look at Sears. Sears was dying for years and years and years. I think is finally getting to the point where I'm at the point where I'm just kind of sick of Sears. I'm just like, just die already. But, it does take a long time for these big corporations to die off. Um, You've got ease of ownership change. So, I mean, if you are a stockholder in an organization, you can sell that stock really easily, and somebody can buy it really easily. Ease of attracting talented employees. If you do have a big corporation, I mean, take a look at like someplace like Google. I mean, they're able to get top-notch employees anytime they want, just because they do have a really good reputation. Separation of ownership from management. So you can own in the organization through stocks and not be, management in it, which is kind of a great thing for it. So, I mean, you can still earn money from the company and not have anything to do with it. So some of the disadvantages of corporation is just the initial cost. I mean, it takes a lot of money to get a corporation up and going. Extensive paperwork. You're going to have a lot of attorneys involved. Double taxation. They do get taxed at a higher rate. You got two tax returns for a corporation. Just the overall size of it. I mean, if you've got a lot of employees, kind of maneuvering your way through the organization can be difficult from time to time. Difficulty of termination. Um, you know, kind of what I was saying is, if the corporation isn't working out, just killing it off, everybody's kind of on the hook for getting paid out and everything. So I mean, it can be difficult to terminate it. And then possible conflict with stockholders and boards of directors. So here's how owners affect management. So owners or stockholders in this situation, they elect a board of directors. The board of directors hire the officers, so like your CEO, your COO, your CTO, different people along those lines. Officers, they set corporate objectives and select managers, and then managers, they supervise the employees and also on the hiring of the employees. And then at the bottom, you also have just your weekly staff type of employees. So the big boys, the business, America's largest corporations in 2017. We've got Walmart at top, Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett, his company. Two, you've got Apple at three, ExxonMobil at four, and McKesson at five. The thing that I found really interesting being Walmart at number one, Walmart right now is obsessed with beating Amazon. Amazon kind of has, their foot in the door as far as, they're great at 2-day shipping if you have Amazon Prime. They've got that name recognition. They're kind of diversifying and getting into different markets, but Walmart is so obsessed with keeping up with Amazon and beating Amazon. And I was at a breakfast presentation not that long ago, and the main presenter, he was from Chase Bank, and he was talking about just how obsessed Walmart is with beating Amazon. And how they shouldn't even really be worried about Amazon because Walmart is so much bigger than Amazon right now. I mean, they're the biggest corporation in America right now, but at the same time, they're just so obsessed with continuing to beat Amazon to where I don't know if they're just kind of getting in their own way. I mean, Walmart is kind of doing some things right now that are really interesting as far as you can go up, you can pick up your groceries if you order them online. Um, you've got in-store pickup. And just some of their different business practices where I think they're kind of going in the right direction. But at the same time, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what happens between Walmart and Amazon over the next 5 to 10 years to see if Amazon actually does get up to Walmart's level, or if Amazon kind of goes off onto a different direction. Because I mean, I know they're putting a lot into technology right now with their online platforms. They've got streaming going right now. You've got your Alexa Dots. And everything. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. So talking here about big companies making mistakes. I mean, we've got Atari here. The amount of surplus from bad games was so big the copies had to be buried in a New Mexican landfill. So they were just making really bad games. They weren't selling them, and then they were having to get rid of them somehow. Blockbuster, which I think there is one Blockbuster left in America. Um, and yeah, Blockbuster at one point passed on a partnership with Netflix and ended up going bankrupt in 2011. So, that's one of those things I've heard about in multiple business courses where Blockbuster had this opportunity to have this partnership with Netflix and kind of get going into a new age, and they were just like, no, we're good with what we're doing. Coca-Cola, New Coke lasted only 77 days because Coca-Cola received more than 1,500 complaint calls a day. Interesting tidbit about the New Coke. First off, it's going to be coming back out this summer because of Stranger Things on Netflix. They have a partnership there. So I'm kind of interested to see new Coke, see what it tastes like because I've never had it. But also, um, there's some rumors around the internet that New Coke was released because in the 1980s, Coca-Cola switched from putting sugar into their original recipe, and they switched over to putting high fructose corn syrup. And the timing of it is they stopped with the classic Coca-Cola recipe. They introduced New Coke. Everybody hated New Coke, and when they reintroduced the classic Coke recipe, they had switched over to high fructose corn syrup at that point, and nobody really knew the difference because they were drinking New Coke at that point, and they were just happy to have the old recipe back, or what they thought was the old recipe. I've researched this. I've found a couple of sites on the internet that kind of confirm it, but I can't get anything definite on it. But I thought that was really interesting. I mean, the timing of it definitely works out was because it was in the mid 1980s whenever high fructose corn syrup started being introduced into sodas, just because it was a cheaper alternative over sugar. So down here we have Pan American World Airways, which was Pan Am. So after the bombing of Flight 103, the airline blamed the government after the victims' families filed a $300 million lawsuit. That was kind of the beginning of the end for Pan Am, which is just kind of crazy to think about. If you ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can, Pan Am at one time was the biggest corporation in America, and now there's just not anywhere to be found. And then Pets.com, so they debuted with a $3 million Super Bowl ad in a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade float. 9 months later, they went bankrupt. So they started out with a lot of capital, spent all that capital on advertising, and yeah, didn't worry about the products too much, which ended up being their demise. So individuals they can incorporate. So anyone can incorporate it. Truckers, doctors, plumbers, athletes, small business owners, they can all incorporate. Normally, stock is not issued to outsiders when individuals incorporate. So the advantages and disadvantages are not exactly the same for large corporations. And then major advantages are limited liability and possible tax benefits. So here's some of the oldest companies in America. We've got J.E. Rhodes and Sons from 1702, Philadelphia Life Insurance, Dexter, Bank of New York. I've never really even heard of most of these companies, but they've been around for quite a long time and they're still going. So S corporations. An S corp is a unique government creation that looks like a corporation but is taxed like a sole proprietorship and a partnership. Um, S corps have shareholders, directors, employees, plus the benefit of a limited liability, and profits are taxed only as the personal income of the shareholders. So qualifications for S corps have no more than 100 shareholders. They have shareholders that are individuals or estates, and they're citizens or permanent residents of the United States. Have only one class of stock. They derive no more than 25% of income from passive resources. And if an S corp loses its S status, it may not operate under again for at least 5 years. So limited liabilities. This is something that's pretty common, especially with sole proprietorships. LLC is a company similar to an S corp, but without the special eligibility requirements. So you have limited liability, choice of taxation, flexible ownership rules, flexible distribution of profits and losses, and operating flexibility. So kind of an example of a LLC is my dad has an LLC, so we have cows, and the cows are under the limited liability company. Now, my dad, he is the direct benefactor of the LLC, so any of the profits that come from the LLC go back to my dad. But if anything were to happen with the cows, like it's mainly just for a limit or for a liability situation. So if a cow were to get out, hit somebody in the road, somebody's car hits it, that sort of thing, my dad can't be sued because it's under the LLC. The LLC can be sued, but my dad can't be sued, which means they can't go after like my dad's like personal property, different things like that. So that's just kind of a quick example of an LLC and why it might be an advantage to go that route if you're considering having a sole proprietorship. So some of the disadvantages of LLC: you've got no stock, therefore ownership is non-transferable. You've got limited lifespan, fewer incentives, taxes, and then there is quite a bit of paperwork that you do have to fill out to become an LLC. So mergers and acquisitions. So a merger is the result of two firms forming one company. An acquisition is one company's purchase of the property and obligations of another company. So merger, just two companies coming together. Acquisition is just one buying out the other. So a vertical merger, the joining of two companies in different stages of related businesses. A horizontal merger, the joining of two firms in the same industry. And then a conglomerate merger, the joining of firms in completely unrelated industries. So here's some examples here. So horizontal merger, you've got a soft drink company, they buy a mineral water company. This didn't happen all that long ago with Coca-Cola and Dasani, or Pepsi and Aquafina. They ended up buying those companies out. You've got down here the vertical merger. So a soft drink company buys artificial sweetener company, related fields, just different stages that they're at. And then you've got this last one, a conglomerate merger, which is a soft drink company buys a snack food company. So in 2015, the food companies Heinz and Kraft merged in a deal valued at nearly $50 billion. What type of merger is this? Vertical, horizontal, or conglomerate? So I would say it would be, a vertical, just because they are in related fields, but also a little bit, kind of a conglomerate as well, just because they do have a very diverse amount of products. So a leverage buyout, an attempt by employees, management, or a group of private investors to buy out the stockholders in a company. An LBO have ranged in size from 50 million to 34 billion and have involved everything from small family businesses to giant corporations. Business acquisitions are not limited to U.S. buyers. So a franchise agreement. This will be a pretty relatable thing, and we'll kind of go over a couple of these topics in the upcoming slides here. So, and a franchise agreement is an arrangement whereby someone with a good idea for a business, franchisor, sells the right to use the business name and sell a product or service franchise to other franchisees in a given territory. So more than 733,000 franchise businesses operate in the U.S., employing approximately 13.3 million people. So here's some top new franchises. So we got Mosquito Joe Pest Control, Blaze Fast Fired Pizza Restaurant, which we don't have one of those in Springfield. I know there is one in Bloomington that I've eaten out quite a few times. It's pretty good pizza. I mean, it's pretty much the same as like a Pie's the Limit or a Turbo Fired Pizza here in Springfield. LeBron James is a really big investor in Blaze Fast Fired Pizza. They're pretty much, it's kind of like a Chipotle for pizza, where you go in, you get your toppings on it, and they put it in the oven for a couple of minutes and it's done. So just going down the line here, Office Evolution, you've got Virtual Office Space, Reality One Group, which is a real estate group, a couple different things like that. So a lot of these are still up and coming. Haven't heard of a lot of them, but you might hear about them here in the near future. So some of the advantages of franchises is management and marketing assistance. So you kind of have that name recognition. You have personal ownership, where it's just you owning it, even though it is something like a Subway or a Blaze Pizza. Nationally recognized name. Financial advice and assistance. If you do kind of run into some issues, you're able to reach out to maybe some other people who have franchises, see kind of what they're doing, or you can reach out to the corporate office and see if they have any advice, and then lower failure rate. So some disadvantages of franchises is you do have large startup costs. Most of these companies, I mean, you have to put in an initial $15,000 just to even get in the door with it, and then you have the cost of putting up a building, the cost of obtaining a license, and just everything that goes along with it. You do have shared profits. So I mean, if you do start a business, like a Subway, where you're going to be making some of the profit, but also you have to kick back some of the profits to Subway, their corporate office. Management regulation, I mean, Subway is in that situation would still kind of be in charge. Um, Coattail effects, if Subway overall has kind of a bad reputation, a lot of people maybe aren't going to be coming into your store. Restrictions on selling. There's only so much that you can do. I know like with McDonald's, you really can't go out on your own too much. They want you to stick to a certain menu and certain prices on that menu. And then, fraudulent franchisors, people just coming around swindling you on selling a franchise. So, diversity in franchising. So, women own about half of the U.S. companies, yet ownership of franchises is about 21%. And then more women are becoming franchisers. So, just kind of looking here, Annie Ann's, Decorating Den, Build-A-Bear were all started by women. So, Diversity Fran is an initiative to build awareness of franchising opportunities within minority communities. Dunkin' Brands Diversity and Franchising Initiatives offers financing and development support to minorities and military veterans, and then over 20% of franchises are minority owned. So we've got home-based franchises. So for home-based franchises, um, relief from commuting stress, extra family time, low overhead expenses, and these are just, franchises that you can run from your home. Main disadvantages is isolation, working on your own, and then you do have long hours. So here are some of the top, home based franchises. So you got Snap-on Tools, Jan Pro. Let's see, your Annie Ann Pretzels, Matco Tools. um, Budget Blinds, CleanNet USA. So quite a bit of like commercial cleaning companies. You've got with between Snap-on and Matco, you've got Professional Tools where you're operating out of a truck and selling on behalf of them. So e-commerce and franchising. So most brick and mortar franchises have expanded online. Many franchisors prohibit franchisee sponsored sites because conflict can erupt. Sometimes reverse royalties are sent to franchisees who believe their sales were hurt by the franchisor's site, and then other franchises solely based online. So, using technology in franchising, franchisors use technology, including social media, to extend their brands, meet the needs of both customers and franchisees, and expand their businesses. So franchising in global markets. So Canada is the most popular target for U.S.-based franchises. Franchises are finding way it's easier to move to China, South Africa, and the Philippines in the Middle East. And then international franchising goes both ways. Some foreign franchises have come to the U.S., including Kumang Learning Centers and H&R Block. So here's some of the high-performing franchises here in the United States. So I mean, we have 7-Eleven, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, UPS Store, Jimmy John's, Dairy Queen, Ace Hardware, Wingstop, Sports Clips, Remax. I mean, I think if we look around here in Springfield, we all, and besides for 7-Eleven, all of these places are here in Springfield. So just kind of a quick rundown of how some of these franchises work. So I mean, whether it be McDonald's, Jimmy John's, something like that. What I was saying earlier, I mean, you kind of have that initial fee that you got to pay just to kind of get in the door with them, whether it be 15,000 on up, and then you can start your franchise from there. But then McDonald's is kind of interesting. So you start your franchise, but then they tell you where you have to build your McDonald's at, and then they own the land that you're building it on. And then you have to pay them to build the McDonald's and everything through a contractor that they approve. So, like I said earlier, go and watch The Founder on Netflix. It's a really good movie. Teaches you a lot about business, about what to do, what not to do. It also gives you some inside information on how McDonald's runs and everything, and how they're not necessarily a food business. They're a real estate company, just because they own real estate everywhere. So for cooperatives, so a cooperative is a business owned and controlled by the people who use it. Producers, consumers, or workers with similar needs who pool their resources for mutual gain. Worldwide co-ops serve 1 billion members. Members democratically control the business by electing a board of directors that hires professional management. Co-ops, a lot of times, what you'll see with that is like farmers markets, or co-op grocery stores, different things like that, where if you have local farmers who are getting a lot of like organic food and everything, they come together, they start selling at their co-op. So look out for those types of organizations, because those can be really good, especially in a local community. So that's all I have for chapter 5. We will see you in chapter 6.